Scotland could be about to get its next UFC fighter. His name is Sean Clancy Jr. He's 23 years old, 8-0 as a professional, and he's finished every single opponent he's beaten. No professional decisions, 5 wins by knockout or TKO, 3 by submission. He's already captured Cage Warriors gold, and on August 25th, he travels to Las Vegas for the biggest opportunity of his career, Dana White's Contender Series. A win could put Sean Clancy Jr. one performance away from a UFC contract. But if you've never heard his name before, who actually is he? Where has he come from? What makes him such an exciting prospect? And most importantly, is he genuinely ready for the UFC? Let's break it down. Sean Clancy Jr. is a welterweight from Paisley, Scotland, and despite only being 23, combat sports aren't something he discovered a few years ago. Clancy has been around martial arts from a young age and developed through the Scottish amateur scene before turning professional in 2023. His amateur career included competing at the 2022 Four Nations Championships, and before his professional MMA career really took off, he was already competing in grappling. But one of the most important parts of his development is where he trains. Clancy represents higher-level MMA in Bathgate under respected Scottish coach James Doolan, and higher level has serious pedigree. It's the same camp that has helped develop UFC-level Scottish fighters, including Stevie Ray, Joanne Wood, and Danny Henry. Clancy has stayed loyal to that team throughout his development, even making the regular journey from Paisley to Bathgate to train. His brother Stephen also trains alongside him. So this isn't a prospect who suddenly appeared from nowhere. He spent years developing inside one of Scotland's established MMA systems, and when he finally turned professional, things moved very quickly. Clancy made his professional MMA debut in April 2023, and since then, nobody has taken him to the judges. His first professional win came by TKO, then another TKO, then a neck crank submission, then elbows, then a rear naked choke, then a body shot TKO, then another neck crank, and finally, the biggest win of his career so far, Melvin van Soudam. In December 2025, Clancy faced the experienced Dutch fighter for the interim Cage Warriors welterweight championship. This was a serious step up. Van Soudam had significantly more professional experience and represented the type of opponent that could show whether the hype around Clancy was justified. Clancy stopped him with punches in the second round. And at just 23 years old, Sean Clancy Jr. had become a Cage Warriors champion. That's important. Cage Warriors has been a pathway to the UFC for years. Conor McGregor fought there. Michael Bisping fought there. Paddy Pimblett fought there. Dan Hardy fought there. And plenty of other UFC fighters have come through that promotion. Winning a Cage Warriors title doesn't guarantee UFC success, but it tells us Clancy isn't simply building an undefeated record against random opposition. He's already competing at a serious level of European MMA. The first thing that jumps off the page is obvious. He finishes fights. 8 professional wins, 8 stoppages. But the interesting part is how he's doing it. Clancy isn't 8-0 because he has one weapon that nobody has figured out yet. He's shown the ability to finish fights both standing and on the ground. 5 of his professional victories have come by knockout or TKO, and 3 have come by submission. That makes him much harder to prepare for. He doesn't necessarily fight like someone desperately hunting a highlight every second. There's patience there. He can wait for opportunities, work from the clinch, defend takedowns, and then increase the pressure when he sees the opening. That combination of finishing instinct and composure is much more interesting to me than someone who's simply knocking over inexperienced opposition. But this is where we need to stop the hype. Because 8-0 doesn't mean you're automatically UFC ready. There are still questions that need answering, and Tuesday could answer some of them. On August 25th, Clancy faces American welterweight Gary Balletto Jr. And Balletto isn't being brought in just to make Clancy look good. He's 11-3 as a professional. More importantly, all 11 of his professional victories have come inside the distance. Balletto is particularly dangerous on the ground, with the majority of those finishes coming by submission. So now, Clancy isn't simply facing someone he needs to beat. He's facing another fighter who knows how to finish. And that's exactly the type of opponent I want to see an undefeated prospect face before calling him UFC ready. Can Clancy maintain his composure on the biggest stage of his career? Can he deal with Balletto's grappling threat? What happens if he doesn't get the early finish? What happens if the fight becomes uncomfortable? And how does he perform, knowing Dana White is sitting there, potentially deciding his future? Because Contender Series isn't simply about winning. Historically, fighters are trying to produce the kind of performance that convinces Dana White they belong in the UFC. And for someone with Clancy's finishing record, there are going to be expectations.
So, do I think Sean Clancy Jr. wins? Yes, but I'm not going to pretend it's guaranteed.
Balletto has considerably more professional experience and a legitimate submission threat. That's exactly why this matchup is interesting. But from what Clancy has shown so far, I think he's the more exciting prospect. He's young, he's undefeated, he's shown finishing ability everywhere. He's already beaten experienced opposition, and at 23, he potentially still has years of development ahead of him. I'm picking Sean Clancy Jr. to win, and if he does it impressively, I think there's a very realistic chance Scotland has another UFC fighter. But getting signed would only be the beginning, because there's a massive difference between being good enough to reach the UFC and being good enough to become something inside it. That's the part we don't know yet, and that's what makes following a prospect this early so interesting. So remember the name, Sean Clancy Jr., and potentially one performance away from the UFC. He faces Gary Balletto Jr. on Dana White's Contender Series on August 25th. I'll be watching, and if Clancy gets that UFC contract, we're definitely coming back to this. Subscribe to MCombat for more combat sports breakdowns and evidence-based performance content. And let me know below, do you think Sean Clancy Jr. gets the UFC contract?